Alright friends, I got a more fun one here for you today. It's like a prefab mail-in order job. Alright, so here we are, Coastal Off-Road. This is a rear bumper for a mid to late 90s 2002 4Runner high clearance rear bumper assembly. The instructions are very poor. I had to number all the pieces out to do this one. This one is currently bench stitched. And as you can see, I did a few things beforehand before I got going. This middle part here was one bent piece. It was like a bent U-channel. So what I did was I kept this surface flat to the table and tacked it and kept it flat. That way I could attach these next pieces on the sides, and then I worked my walls upward, one at a time. I slid these into the notches, if you can see that. Nothing crazy here. This all does go together, and I try to keep all of these joints open square joints, because what's going to happen is when you weld this, it's going to fill in that gap, and it's going to be a nice round bead. Buddy's going to get it pre-tested. He'll fit it into his truck and see if it works out, or if we got to tweak anything, I could just cut it off real quick. But we found this to be the easiest method. Just kind of tack it together here. We also made sure that these rails are bumped out a little bit, as these designs do bevel them a little bit. However they're cut, they do focus outward a little more. So I made sure to just make sure it bumps out just a little bit. Your eyeball is your best level with this project, trust me. Oh, and I almost forgot. Don't forget these. You have to pre-weld these nuts onto these plates. That way you can insert them into your frame and then bolt them from inside the frame out. I'll have updates. And then we're going to do the front bumper, which is still in pieces. So I've seen some people in other videos lay out each piece and mark them. And this particular bumper has quite a few pieces to it, so I made sure I just laid everything out to the instructions. The kit described 3 different pieces for this one pre-bent nose, so that was a lot easier on my part. All I had to do really was just tack on these side pieces. Next was this bottom horseshoe plate, which basically just lined up with the 2 side plates and the bottom of the grate. The table I'm working off is pretty level, so I had this little magnetic level to keep things as straight as possible. Ten and 11 went together just like this, and I used a couple of magnetic squares to keep things as straight as possible, and I put a few tacks. The first time I did it, I put the faceplate on the wrong way, so I had to grind it back off and redo it again. Then I assembled it. Next, I attached my side wing assemblies to the middle using a piece of tubing. A piece of angle would probably work better. That way it kept everything nice and straight. I used every C-clamp I had for this part. When I was put on my little end cap number 12s, I used my magnetic squares to keep everything straight once again. When I first started welding, I bought these at Home Depot, and I've had them ever since. I barely ever use the things, but for this project they came in pretty damn good handy. So I'm keeping everything in sort of a top-down order here. I'm working with the bumper upside down now and working my way towards the bottom of it. I always put stitches on the inside. I was trying to keep as many tacks away from the outside as possible, so when I did fully weld this thing, they weren't getting in the way too much. I took my multi-purpose tool here and I basically leveled this bottom plate, because if you assemble it, naturally it does not stay level against that side plate. So be sure to be aware of that. I assume most of these kits are kind of the same. Just different layouts and different pieces and the same crappy instructions. So this video, if anything, even if it isn't the kit you exactly have, it gives you kind of a direction to go along. This is where directions actually came in handy. They did mention something about this one. This fascia plate, make sure that oval hole is 1 1/4 on top and 1 1/8 on the bottom. Then I brought my 2 vertical pieces inward with my magnetic squares to roughly about 10" on each side. The also fairly limited instructions also made a great point to make sure this notch is on the driver's side of the bumper itself. These little LED mount plates just get centered on them 2 end holes and just squared up. You could choose to beef up the toe holes any which way you like. I did it this way so I could put more weld on the inside and the outside. Now this was the fun part. I cut a 7" block. You could use wood. I just used some tubing that I had around. And I made sure to rest both of these bars on that tubing. So then I could get some fairly rough measurements of what I needed to cut. And as you can see, I leveled this piece on before I bandsawed it. This part here was more of a learning experience for me, because I've never done this before. But my best bet was to keep everything nice and level and cut each side the same. That way when I was doing both of them relatively the same way, they both ended up in the same exact location. And so I ended up chamfering the top so it would actually sink in more to the contour of this tubing. And I just made sure that each side was the same height. As I was making this video, these bumpers were pre-tested before I welded them. This goes to show that you can bench weld these things as long as they're square. Let's put some heat on this shit, shall we?